Raise your hand if you want your nails to look perfect all the time. Me too. I'm Sarah Gibson-Tuttle from Olive & June, and this is exactly why we created the Mani System. We wanted to make it possible for everyone everywhere to give themselves a beautiful manicure at home. With our tools and our long-lasting polish, each manicure with our Mani System comes out to just $2. That's right, $2. No more $30, $40, $50 manis that you get at a salon and they take hours. Now you can paint your nails on your time and love them more than ever. And by the way, when people ask, who did your nails? Where did you get them done? You're going to proudly say, I did them myself. Get 20% off your first Mani System with code DIYNail20 at oliveandjune.com/DIYNail20. That's code DIYNail20 for 20% off at oliveandjune.com/DIYNail20.
Offer valid on standard browsers, U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, really? But there I was in my empty, quiet house, my laptop on the kitchen counter, and I typed in my name. Looking for a man between the ages of 40 to 60? Sure, why not?
Date My Age is different. With verified profiles, you can feel safe and secure to explore meaningful connections with interesting and mature singles.
Date My Age made it really easy. I could join and view online profiles for free. All of a sudden, my empty house wasn't so quiet anymore. I got so much attention, it just made me feel seen and alive. Date My Age helped me start a totally new chapter in my life.
Find a friend, a lover, a partner at Date My Age. Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
Hey, all you true crime fans, this is Mike Ferguson.
And this is Mike Morphin.
And we'd like to invite you to listen to our podcast, Criminology.
Launched in 2017, we've covered a variety of strange cases from murders to missing persons.
We dive into a variety of cases in both the U.S. and abroad.
Some of the cases are ones you may not have heard of, like the Pocatello babysitter murders or the Canal murders.
Other cases we cover are some of the most historic in true crime, like the Tylenol murders and the Lindbergh kidnapping. We also dive into cases that are currently breaking thanks to DNA and forensic genealogy.
Sometimes you'll hear from people connected to the cases, like the interview we did with the brother-in-law of the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo.
There are 200 episodes of Criminology available to binge on right now, including full seasons covering the Zodiac Killer, the Golden State Killer, and Ted Bundy, and new episodes come out every Saturday night.
Subscribe to Criminology today, wherever you listen to your podcast.
You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
My name is Dr. Sachs.
And I'm Dr. Schlossberg.
And we're both criminologists who've devoted our entire careers to working in the criminal justice system as practitioners, educators, researchers, and now podcasters. And this is our newest podcast, Campus Killings by AbJack Entertainment. This episode takes us to Lehigh University, located in eastern Pennsylvania in 1986, where a young woman's brutal murder would be solved, though a complicated legal battle followed and would lead to sweeping changes on college campuses across the United States. Jeanne Clery was the only girl born to parents Howard Jr. and Connie. She had two brothers, Howard III and Benjamin. Howard was a businessman with a successful mail-order business. He'd been an athlete once at Dartmouth, but was partially paralyzed by polio. Connie went to Barnard. The well-to-do family lived at 802 Brookwood Lane in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Jeanne graduated from Agnes Irwin High School, and she really fell in love with Lehigh, even though both of her brothers went to Tulane. The family tells the story that Jeanne was all set to enroll at Tulane, but when they visited, they learned of a murder of a student, ironically, Amy, and it scared them, so Jeanne decided to go closer to home. Studying liberal arts, Jeanne planned to go into communications. She was a member of the tennis team, ranked 8th of the 14 in the fall season, but was not playing in the spring of 1986, so she could focus more on her academic life. In August 1985, she and her mom had made it to the finals of a tennis tournament at the Marion Cricket Club. They played together all the time and were reportedly very close. Jeanne was described as friendly and quiet. She got along with everyone. She had just been dropped off by her parents after the Easter break, and she was so excited to return to the school she loved so much. Lehigh campus is located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which ironically, Amy, is about 20 minutes from where I now live. It is a school of about 4,400 undergraduate students and 1,500 graduate students. And in 1986, most lived in campus housing. But this is, by most measures, a small campus. However, it was a rural campus that was spread over 1,600 acres. Stoughton is a co-ed dorm on the eastern edge of the campus near 8th Street and Taylor Stadium. The second floor housed 22 male students, while the third floor housed 22 female students. The first floor was a lounge common area, if you recall from dorm life. Jeanne's roommate was named Sarah Leslie Bean, and she was from Staten Island. The Clarys said that the campus was beautiful and, quote, looks safe.
Have you been there since it's so close?
I have not, but after, doing the research for this, I'm definitely going to visit. Was it safe, though? Would this turn out to be true for Jeanne? Remember, she didn't go to the other school because she feared the crime, because there was a murder. All right, let's fast forward to April 4th. On Friday night, Jeanne and her best friend and hallmate, Susan Kwan, went to a frat party at Pi Kappa Alpha House, and then got a ride to Phi Sigma Frat House, where they stayed until about 2 a.m. The two got separated, and Jeanne knocked on Susan's door around 4 a.m. Her roommate, Catherine Glazer, told her that Susan wasn't back yet. So Jeanne ran into a student named Gregory Coate, who lived on the second floor of Stoughton. And remember, that floor is where the males lived. As he was walking down the third floor hallway, they chatted for 15 minutes or so, and Jeanne asked him if he had any snacks in his room. He didn't, so they cheek-kissed goodnight, and Gregory went to his room. At this point, it is believed that Jeanne went to bed. Jeanne's roommate had a date and had lost her room key, so she asked Jeanne to leave the door unlocked, which Jeanne did. Susan returned to the dorm around 4:30 a.m., and her roommate Catherine told her Jeanne had stopped by. Susan walked 3 doors down and knocked on Jeanne's door, but there was no answer. She pushed open the door, which was cracked. Remember I said she left it open, and she saw that the light was off and that Jeanne was asleep in the fetal position facing the wall and under the covers. This was reportedly around 4:45 a.m. A male student named Richard Petrino was on the way to clean his frat house, where he was a pledge. Remember pledge duties?
Yep, I had to craft.
Oh, okay, that I haven't heard of. What's craft?
Like all night, do arts and craft projects.
Oh, okay, never had to do that, but I did have to clean. So Richard left the third floor of Stoughton around 7:40 a.m. on April 5th, and he passed Jeanne's room. And he saw through the wide open door that she was just lying on the bed naked from the waist down. I just kept walking, he told the morning call. At 11:29 a.m., Susan went to Jeanne's room. She noted that Jeanne's door was open, so she went in to check on her friend. The room was in disarray. It was evident that a struggle had occurred. Jeanne was lying on the bed naked, except for a t-shirt that had been bunched up around her neck. She lay uncovered. Jeanne was lying on her stomach facing the wall, Susan said. I walked over to cover her, took the sheet, and covered her from the waist down. Then I touched her shoulders twice to wake her up. Susan said her friend's name and tapped her, but when there was no response, she bent over her friend and saw blood on the pillow and Jeanne's nose and mouth. Susan said, I knew something was terribly wrong, and she ran down the hall to alert the RA. The RA summoned another student who had training in first aid and CPR. She felt for a pulse but found none. The police arrived a few moments later and ushered her out of the room. A paramedic named John Lindsay assumed he was dealing with an overdose. Remember, we discussed this in another case. He verified that there was no pulse. He found a signet ring in Jeanne's hand, and a slinky was found under the bed. Jeanne was pronounced dead at the scene at 12:39 p.m. by Northampton County Coroner Joseph Reichel. Time of death estimated at approximately 5 a.m. The death was declared suspicious. Back in Bryn Mawr, the Clerys arrived home in a taxi returning from a trip to Bermuda to find police cars in their driveway. They were asked to come inside, and they were told that their daughter was dead. The police explained that the cause of death was unknown at the time, but the next day they learned the truth about what happened to Jeanne. The autopsy was conducted at Muhlenberg Hospital Center, and it was revealed here, Amy, that Jeanne had been beaten, kicked, and bitten on both cheeks and one of her breasts. Her entire body was bruised. Her throat had been slashed multiple times with a piece of broken glass. She had been sexually assaulted vaginally and anally so roughly that her internal tissues were torn.
I have a question. The first person who walked by the room, he didn't notice any of that?
Yeah, he said he just kept walking. I don't think he noticed.
Maybe it was dark and he just saw a naked woman and didn't want to.
Yeah, her friend went in and actually, looked at her, a more closer look.
She didn't notice all the other bruising on her body?
She noticed the blood and that something was wrong right away and ran out. It was also revealed that Jeanne had consumed alcohol an hour or more before her death, which I don't think is that uncommon on, college campuses.
Or very relevant?
No. She was strangled with a metal slinky that her roommate identified as coming from their own dorm room, and this was according to the original autopsy. Keep that in mind. The county coroner later testified at the preliminary hearing that he compared the coiled wire slinky found under Jeanne's bed with the marks found on her throat, and they were a match. He would later come to change his opinion. But for now, he's saying the slinky was the object that caused her death. The official cause of death was manual strangulation with abrasions, bruises, and marks from the glass and the slinky visible on Jeanne's throat. Following this horrific murder, the dorms were unlocked during the day, but were supposed to be locked for the night at 10 p.m. or midnight, depending on who you ask. Stoughton had no guard, though, or security checkpoint. You know how we have those guards and security checkpoints on our campus? Well, unfortunately, none of those existed.
I don't think they're very useful anyway, but
they could or could not be useful, but they're another measure, layer of security.
Sometimes they're deterrents, if nothing else.
Sometimes they're a deterrent, exactly. Jeanne's death brought attention to the fact that dorms were supposed to be locked at night, but the students were known to prop the doors open for easy access. I mean, using pizza boxes and so on. I remember this kind of thing happening in my dorm as well. Immediately after her murder, Lehigh doubled security patrols and started enforcing the dorm locking rules, though. They visited all the dorms and reminded students to lock their doors. The campus police chief ordered more regular patrols of the dorms by his officers. The school sent a letter to parents and students encouraging them to look out for one another, walk in pairs, and stick to well-lit areas. The students and tennis team members expressed shock that this had happened at Lehigh. This was the first murder at Lehigh, which had been in existence since 1865.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think everyone was really surprised by this. The students were scared, and the impact on their lives was permanent. A year after the crime, it was reported that women on campus were much more aware of the dangers of walking alone and not locking their doors. The dorm doors were never really propped open anymore, except by seemingly clueless freshmen who were soon lectured about the murder. So it was just the incoming people. Everyone really, smartened up and locked down. But what about the perpetrator?
If you love smash burgers, the crispy edges, bold, beefy flavor, you need to try Omaha Steaks' all-new smash burgers. They're pre-smashed, made with 100% extra-aged beef, and grill-ready. No mess, no griddle. I tossed a few on the grill last weekend, straight from freezer to bun in just 5 minutes. The sear? Perfect. The flavor? Rich, juicy, and seriously next level. Way better than anything I've had from the store. Plus, I grabbed the Built for the Grill pack at omahasteaks.com/smash and scored 16 smash burgers free. With high-quality meats always on hand, I'm already eyeing my next order. Maybe there's steak burgers or that killer bacon-wrapped filet. Family-owned since 1917, Omaha Steaks brings 5 generations of premium quality delivered right to your door. Smash burger lovers, this is your moment. Get ready to smash expectations with new Omaha Steaks smash burgers. Visit omahasteaks.com/smash and order the Built for the Grill pack with 16 free smash burgers. That's 16 free Omaha Steaks smash burgers at omahasteaks.com/smash. See site for details.
Trading shouldn't have barriers. When Robinhood started, it was built to make trading more accessible. Now Robinhood offers more sophisticated trading tools. Experience the future of trading on Robinhood Legend, the all-new desktop platform that harnesses intuitive design to deliver a seamless experience for traders. Free to use with a Robinhood account, Robinhood Legend is designed for how you trade, with powerful charts including custom intervals down to the tick, and over 80 indicators and drawing tools. Trade all your favorite assets, including popular stocks and ETFs, all in one place. Take your trading to the next level by customizing your layout in seconds, and even enter and exit positions in one tap right from the chart with up to 8 charts per layout. The future of trading is fast, powerful, and precise. Experience it now on Robinhood Legend. Sign up today. Investing is risky. Robinhood Financial LLC. Member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Other fees may apply.
On April 7th, 1986, just a few days after the murder, it was announced that another student was being held for this vicious crime. Joseph Henry, age 20, of Newark, New Jersey, a sophomore, had been arrested at 2:49 a.m. Joseph lived in off-campus housing with 4 other students. He had been the subject of a tip to police stating that he had told 3 other students that he assaulted a girl and stole some of her belongings. So early in the morning of April 7th, 2 officers surveilled the home that he shared with other students while at the university. Police Sergeant Edward Shupp prepared a search warrant for the house. The 3 students who reported Joseph to the police were Kenneth Copeland, Stephen Rossi, and Clifton Hubbard. Joseph also reportedly admitted the murder to his friend, George Bass. So this guy has committed a crime, and he's talking right away and to multiple people.
He didn't admit to killing her to anyone, did he?
He admitted to a couple of people, it seems, that he broke in, he may have assaulted a girl, but then it apparently seems he admitted to others that he did kill her.
Okay.
They had an affidavit that stated that a student had reported Joseph said he strangled a girl and cut his hands and bit her face. He identified to one student that he killed her because she woke up when he entered the room and he was afraid she would identify him. The story is not quite sinking, though, right? Is it a robbery, or is it a sexual assault, or is it both? What was the original intention? Regardless, at 2:25 a.m., State Police investigator John Kosovar and Bethlehem Police Sergeant Timothy Stevens knocked on Joseph's door, and he answered in his bathrobe. They showed him the search warrant, and he said, "What's this about?" The officers responded that it was about the murder of Jeanne Clery. Joseph pointed the police to his room. Next to his bed, the police found items including a maroon wallet, cameras, jewelry, her radio, and $21 in cash.
And the police knew immediately that these were missing items from the room?
Yes. A gold ring bore the initials of Jean's roommate, and the wallet contained Jean's license and credit cards.
All right. Easy.
Yeah, this is really a no-brainer. Also found in Joseph's room was a blood-stained, torn piece of a curtain. The fabric was a piece of a curtain hanging in the first-floor Stoughton Lounge, which had been seen intact the night before by a student hanging out in the lounge. So obviously something that he ripped either intentionally or unintentionally on his way out. Joseph asked twice more what this was about before Kosovar showed him the items belonging to Jeanne and her roommate, and Joseph was placed under arrest. He was arraigned, Amy, get this, in his robe and underwear.
Oh.
That's correct.
Don't they usually, if someone's being arraigned, they have them in prison garb by then?
Sometimes they'll bring him in right in their clothes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was held without bail, not surprisingly. The charges were criminal homicide, rape, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, indecent assault, burglary, theft, receiving stolen property, robbery, and aggravated assault.
Okay.
They're
piling it on.
Oh, they're piling it on. Yeah, this is unbelievable, really. Now, what did Joseph have to say? He admitted that he entered Jean's room, her dorm room, looking for a room to rob. He said the access was easy because a pizza box propped the exterior door open, and Jean's door was left open. Remember, it was cracked. He said that he tried to steal a TV from the wall of the first floor lounge, but it was bolted down. And so he climbed the stairs to the second floor. but he found the door to the hallway from the stairwell locked, so he proceeded to the 3rd floor. Jeanne's was the first door he came to. It was the first room, again, that was cracked open, and it was the first room at the top of the stairs. You see, Jeanne was also one of the few residents in the dorm that weekend because, remember, it was Easter break, so a lot of people were still away. The police affidavit stated that the girl saw him, so he started hitting and beating her badly and strangled her. He kicked and bit her on the face. The bite marks went through her cheeks and left a clear impression of the gap between Joseph's front teeth. This is, very violent. After he killed her, he gathered the stolen goods and left, but he soon returned to ensure that he hadn't dropped his wallet at the scene. The attack on Jeanne was determined to be random because the two didn't know each other.
Did he admit to sexually assaulting her?
Not yet.
Okay.
Joseph went to the room of Kenneth Copeland after age 19 around 6 a.m. and he told him that he had killed someone, and then he started telling others. So the stories varied, as you know, but he was very quick to start spilling this information. But, now we know a little bit about him here, but what is his history? As I said, he was age 20 from Newark, New Jersey. He enrolled in the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences, but he had not yet declared a major. In high school, his high school yearbook shows a bookish young black man in glasses. He was voted most bashful and most studious. He had no behavioral or no documented behavioral problems in high school. And his records show that he was an average student, though he graduated with honors in math and science. His SAT scores were below average, and his class rank at UHS was 59th out of 107 students. His teacher said he was mannerly, polite, conscientious, introverted. So, and
doesn't sound like a murderer.
Doesn't sound like a violent man. He was described by his Lehigh student neighbors as quiet and studious. But Joseph had been thrown out of Lehigh his freshman year for poor grades, and he had apparently written 3 suicide notes to his parents and brother. The notes expressed despondency at letting down his family, but also blamed them for the pressure that he was under. Clearly, he never carried out, not that we know, attempted to carry out these suicide threats, and he was allowed to return to school after doing makeup work. He seemed to spend a lot of time studying, but he was just making passing grades at Lehigh, so he wasn't really succeeding. A girl who was friends with Joseph said that she saw him at a party on the Lehigh campus on the morning before the murder and that he was acting very strange. She said that she didn't know him to do hard drugs, but he was acting like it. And how so? She said he was slow to react, slow to recognize her and others. And he was saying that everyone here is afraid of me, not making any sense. She then saw him on Saturday after the murder, and he was acting normal. I can't believe he did that he would do something like that. That's not the type of person he seemed to be, according to this girl. But how well do you ever really know someone? And we can't judge on appearances, right? On the day of the murder, Joseph had just learned that he lost by 1 vote an election for president of the Black Student Union. There were, at that time, approximately 60 Black students enrolled at Lehigh. Joseph was reportedly very upset about this loss, disagreeing with the way the election was handled. So that's a little bit about, the events kind of leading up. But prior to the murder, Joseph had met Kenneth Copeland in the fall of 1985. He attended a party at Kenneth's house on April 4th as part of a recruitment weekend for racial minorities sponsored by the university. His younger brother Jason, visiting for the weekend, also attended. This party went on until 3 or 3:30 a.m., April 5th. At the party, Joseph drank a lot, and other students kept an eye on the situation because apparently he was known to pick verbal fights when he drank too much. They called it like a mood he would get in. But Kenneth later testified that he'd never seen Joseph in a physical fight. Kenneth said that he and Joseph drank malt liquor, gin, rum, and vodka that night, and that he had gotten upset that a, quote, girlfriend of his left with someone else, and he kicked in a door. His buddy, Stephen Rossi, said Joseph had been speaking with a girl at the party, this is kind of the background, but came up to him complaining, why does she always do this to me? And with that, he punched a hole in the door and he kicked it off its hinges. Rossi had to go and calm him down. He didn't perceive him as being that drunk, but yet he was still showing acts of violence here, and I don't think they had seen that from him before. Joseph's friend George Bass, a former Lehigh student who was also visiting campus on the night of April 4th, was at that same party, and he said that Joseph came upstairs about midnight and told him that he'd argued with a girl and then kicked in a bedroom door at the party house. So he was admitting to committing this act. Rossi and Joseph and the others were walking between parties on the Hill, which is kind of frat row at Lehigh. You had a frat row at college too, right?
Yep.
We did as well. And a car sped by them. They threw a beer bottle at the vehicle and the driver got out, but drove off when they yelled, "What are you going to do?" Rossi later said that Joseph's behavior changed when he was drinking. Sometime after 3:30 a.m., Kenneth drove Joseph and his younger brother Jason home to Joseph's house at 505 East 5th Street. Kenneth stayed there and partied until about 4:40 a.m. and then left and went home to bed. Another student who lived in the house with Joseph and had witnessed Joseph almost get into a fight at a frat party earlier that night stayed in the kitchen chatting with others until it was just him and Joseph. He said that Joseph was being quieter than usual, but was still joking and still smiling. After all the others went to bed, Joseph suddenly went out the back door, and Roger went to bed. Joseph's friend Kenneth later said in a statement to the police, "Joe Henry came into my room a little after 6 a.m. He told me that he killed someone. I didn't believe him. He said he went to Lower Centennial to steal some things. A girl saw him. He said he beat her bad. He said he kicked her in the vagina and bit her cheeks. I didn't believe him. When he saw that I was taking the news poorly, he said it was a joke." He told Joseph that 6 a.m. was way too early for jokes. The two fell asleep, and after a while, Joseph left. When Kenneth woke up, he told his two roommates how Joseph had him going about having someone murdered. Shortly after, Joseph came back about 11 a.m. with the radio he said he'd stolen and a backpack filled with beer. Joseph's buddy Clifton saw the radio in Joseph's possession as well. He appeared to be acting normal, though. George Bass also saw the radio that Joseph had, which he thought was strange because Joseph had told him the night before that he had no money. On Saturday, Kenneth and Joseph played in an alumni basketball game, and then Kenneth drove Joseph home to shower before they both attended a cocktail party at the university president's home. This was part of a big minority recruitment. At the reception at the president's house, Stephen Rossi said that Joseph came up to him and said that he'd gone to a girl's room, stole a radio and camera, and strangled her. He told Rossi that his hands got messed up doing it and showed him the cuts. Rossi asked him how he knew the girl was dead, and Joseph said because he made sure. Joseph also told another student that night at the party, even though at the party, Joseph was dancing and having a good time.
Sorry, no one reported this?
Yeah, hold that thought, because that's what I was thinking. Oh my gosh, he's telling all these people. Remember, at first, I don't think they're taking him seriously. Then he's starting to tell more people. It's starting to sink in. The alcohol's passed. After that party, they went to 2 more parties where they heard that a female student had died of alcohol poisoning. So it hadn't been confirmed yet either that a student was dead. This is all just rumor and hearsay, okay? At the final party at the University Center around 10:30, Kenneth and George Bass learned that the dead student had actually been murdered. And that's when they first, I think, connected. But Kenneth was skeptical, and he asked an RA who confirmed that a female student had been killed in a Lower Centennial dorm room. The two were surprised to realize that Joseph was probably telling the truth about what he's done. Kenneth said, "That's when I knew it wasn't a joke." After the party, George and Joseph sat in a car and talked, and George asked if he'd really done it, and Joseph said yes, because she was getting ready to scream. He told George that his prints were not on file in Pennsylvania and that he'd made sure to wipe the place down before anyway. He said he'd never raped and murdered anyone before. He asked George, "How are you fellows taking it?" And George said, "Not too well." George didn't sleep that night because he had such a guilty feeling.
I would imagine he was also frightened.
I would be terrified. Meanwhile, Kenneth said, "I told Joe to get the radio out of my house and I advised him to get rid of it." Joseph removed the radio the next morning. I guess he was also paranoid. I would assume he's paranoid having, a murdered girl's item in his house. He was probably, get it out. He wants nothing to do with this. On Sunday, Kenneth told Hubbard and Rossi that Joseph had said he killed someone, but he said it was a joke. They compared notes and realized he told them all about what he had done. And this is when they decided to go to the police. The 3 of them went to Bethlehem Police Department and related Joseph's confessions. The officer showed Kenneth a photo of Jeanne. Kenneth didn't know what she looked like, but the radio in the photo, which was from the roll film in Jeanne's camera and was taken in her dorm room, sure looked like the one that Joseph had in his possession. Therefore, Joseph was arrested at 2:49 a.m. on Monday. County Detective Anthony Vanicola transported Joseph to Easton Hospital for a once-over, and they found cuts and puncture wounds on his hands caused by that broken glass he had used on Jeanne. Blood, saliva, and hair samples, as well as bite impressions, were collected at the time. Meanwhile, Jeanne's funeral was held on April 9th in St. Thomas of Villanova Catholic Church at Villanova University. Her funeral was attended by 600 mourners and 5 priests officiated the service. Tennis teammate Holly Stass said of her friend, "It's Jeanne's laugh that we will remember most." I think it was Howard Clery, Jeanne's father. His words would be remembered the most. He criticized Lehigh, saying, "Have you forgotten to screen out the rapists, the morally perverted, the drug addicts, the dormitory thieves? I think you're afraid to do it because you would be discriminating." So this remark has also, I would say, maybe a hint of racism in it.
It's implying racism.
I think it's unclear what this statement mean, but did he mean by screening out the criminals, they would be seen as discriminatory because the criminal in this case, and we don't like to say criminals, we like to say offender, was not white. We can't, possibly know, but Clery was described by followers as, quote, pouring out in a river of anger at liberals who sympathize with criminals and ignore victims, at limp-wrist university presidents who won't arm campus police, at gutless college trustees who wink at underage drinking, at naive professors who don't live in the real world, at fraternities whose animal members treat any visiting females as potential sex partners. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, well, this is the father of a murdered girl, but I think that this says a lot. In December 1986, the family attended a dedication ceremony, though, even though he had, shared these views. But they did attend this dedication ceremony for a meditation pavilion outside Stoughton Hall. Students shared memories of Jeanne and how happy she was to be at Lehigh. They talked about how fun she was, her infectious laugh, her being pranked by the boys on the second floor who put her in the shower in her clothes one day, and how she loved junk food and didn't care one bit that she had gained the freshman 15.
Raise your hand if you want your nails to look perfect all the time. Me too. I'm Sarah Gibson Tuttle from Olive & June, and this is exactly why we created the Manny system. We wanted to make it possible for everyone everywhere to give themselves a beautiful manicure at home. With our tools and our long-lasting polish, each manicure with our Manny system comes out to just $2. That's right, $2. No more $30, $40, $50 manis that you get at a salon and they take hours. Now you can paint your nails on your time and love them more than ever. And by the way, when people ask, who did your nails? Where did you get them done? You're going to proudly say, I did them myself. Get 20% off your first Manny system with code DIYNail20 at oliveandjune.com/DIYNail20. That's code DIYNail20 for 20% off at oliveandjune.com/DIYNail20.
Offer valid on standard browsers, U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, really? But there I was in my empty, quiet house, my laptop on the kitchen counter, and I typed in my name. Looking for a man between the ages of 40 to 60? Sure, why not?
Date My Age is different. With verified profiles, you can feel safe and secure to explore meaningful connections with interesting and mature singles.
Date My Age made it really easy. I could join and view online profiles for free. All of a sudden, my empty house wasn't so quiet anymore. I got so much attention, it just made me feel seen and alive. Date My Age helped me start a totally new chapter in my life.
Find a friend, a lover, a partner at Date My Age. Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
Back to the legal case, though. At his arraignment, Joseph said over and over, I didn't do it. Even though, yes.
Does he say that he had falsely confessed? Or, I'm wondering, is he, recanting altogether? Or he's saying, I never even said I did?
Have to wait and see, Amy.
Okay.
He was represented by Lorenzo Crow and George Blasco, public defenders, initially, but in May, he dismissed them in favor of private attorneys Michael Farrell and Gregory Sleet. The DA announced that he intended to seek the death penalty because of the brutality involved. The prosecutor would later say that Joseph tortured Jeanne by drawing the piece of broken glass across her throat before strangling her, and he had bitten her. He beat her while she was still alive. The county court ordered mental health testing of Joseph pursuant to a motion by the public defenders. They were intending to, pursue mental health claims here. The defense claimed that Joseph, quote, appears to be severely limited in memory and attention span and has poor reasoning ability. They said that he may have been mentally ill or legally insane at the time of the murder, and they wanted tests to determine whether he suffered from mental disease or defect and whether he was capable of appreciating the wrongfulness of his actions. The defense later tried to terminate this request because they wanted a private evaluation by someone of their choosing. And why would they want someone of their choosing, Amy?
They wanted somebody who was more sympathetic to their side.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course. You know, they want someone who's, or you know what, they want someone who's more likely to testify for a defendant.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Than, you know, a prosecution witness. The judge in the case granted the defense the opportunity to use a private practitioner of their choice, but said, of course, the prosecution would have access to the results. Racism sort of punctuated the situation, though. One of Joseph's attorneys got a phone call at home threatening his life if he, quote, continues to represent that N-word.
Wow.
You believe that? I mean, I can believe that.
When is this? In the 80s?
Yeah. The ADA in charge of the prosecution was Richard Pepper, and at the preliminary hearing, the Clerys and about 50 others, including Joseph's family, were in attendance. Joseph was dressed in a tan suit with large glasses and a flat-top haircut. We've talked about this before.
Yes.
In Women in Crime, right?
Yep.
What's that called when the look that you're trying to present?
I remember the case. It was in the murder of Sarah Butler.
Yes.
And he ended up being a serial killer.
Yes, and it's kind of called, what's the look? The nerd look?
It's this idea that defense attorneys will sometimes use the strategy to make their client appear, quote, nerdy.
Yes.
So that the jury can't picture them being evil.
Anything other than, right, okay. At this, you know, lots of people testified. Kenneth Copeland testified about him not showing up in his room. He testified about him confessing. He testified about seeing cuts on his hands. This was really a no-brainer hearing. The judge determined that there was sufficient cause to hold him over for trial. They wasted no time proceeding to a trial. Joseph's attorneys filed a notice of their intent to enter a plea of insanity on October 3rd, 1986. Basically, the motion included the statement that Joseph suffered from disease or defect of the mind, that he didn't understand the nature or quality of his actions, which is the insanity defense in multiple states. Okay, so now we know that they're going to be mounting an insanity defense. The defense made a lot of moves here, just so you know. They moved to bar the imposition of the death penalty on grounds that it had been applied in Pennsylvania in a racially disproportionate manner, which I think was a smart move. They moved for a change of venue, saying that the Lehigh area would not be able to ignore the case or the defendant's race. And they cited the prominence of the victim's family and her race. They also moved to exclude physical items seized from Joseph's room, as well as autopsy photos of Jeanne. Finally, they moved to exclude planned testimony for the prosecution by a cellmate of Joseph's, Marvin Brunson, who reported that Joseph made the comment, quote, "I'll kill you just like I killed that girl." We've talked about jailhouse snitches before. Yeah. I don't find them reliable. I understand that move.
I think they have enough evidence without it.
I think they have way more than enough. All right, so the trial lasted 7 days. It commenced on April 7th, 1987, so about a year after the murder. Jury selection was from a pool of Lancaster County prospective jurors, despite the defense objections that the 140 potential jurors were all white.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, Joseph was the only black person in the room, according to the morning call.
Ooh, that's problematic.
It's problematic. The judge sequestered the jury, the death penalty was on the table, and jury selection took a week. In opening statements, ADA Richard Pepper told the jury about the violence that had been done to Jeanine. He explained Joseph's outrage over having lost this election, frustration over a girl. He explained the situation, the ransacking of the room, how he admitted to others that what he had done, laying out, kind of the roadmap. The defense, essentially, they were mounting an insanity defense for the jury. They explained that Joseph's father and 2 uncles had been diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenics, and Joseph himself had a psychiatric condition that was worsened by even small amounts of alcohol. So they tried to show that Joseph was a shy, quiet, studious person who was the product of a broken home with an extensive family history of mental illness. This was their strategy. Various people testified about Jeanne's last night, finding her body, interactions with Joseph. All of the friends testified. A doctor for the prosecution testified that Jeanne was alive when she was raped and sodomized based on the bruising and tearing of her anal and vaginal tissues. He testified to the large bruises. He also testified that it took 2 to 4 minutes to die from strangulation. We've talked about this before. When people talk about strangulation and they try to say that it happened quickly, that's not true. It takes several minutes and a consistent effort, a very, very strong, consistent effort to manually strangle someone. And remember the coroner testified about the slinky having been used to kill Jeanne? But now he recognized that he was mistaken from a lab analyst who found that there was no blood at all in the slinky, and it would have been if he used it to cut her throat. So it was apparent that it was just the piece of glass from a broken beer bottle that was used. A forensic dentist testified that the bite mark on Jeanne's right cheek matched with Joseph's dental impressions. But what do we think about that, Amy?
That's considered forensic odontology, and it's classified as what is known as a junk science.
Right.
I don't think that you can use it without corroborating evidence. It certainly is not a valid or reliable science.
Yeah, I agree. And I think they have other very strong evidence here.
I don't think they need it.
Right. But at that time, people thought it was strong. Remember?
Oh, for sure.
That was around the Bundy time.
Course,
so people thought it was this was a game changer. A friend of Joseph's, Roger, testified that he believed Joseph had been very upset and depressed. And, he related that incident about the woman who kind of rejected Joseph and how bad he felt about it. He said that Joseph was drinking a lot the night before, and when he drank, he could be filled with anger. He just basically said when Joseph drank, we had to look out for him. It came out at trial as well that records at Lehigh showed 6 months before the murder, Joseph had been disciplined by the school for throwing a rock through a female student's window. Some reports say he had also been fired from a restaurant job after a violent episode, but he did not have a criminal record.
We see this a lot. I don't think that a lack of a criminal record means that there was no criminal tendencies or capacity to be violent.
Sure, I would have to agree. But then the defense has their turn, right, Amy? So they call their first and most crucial witness, a psychiatrist. And he said that basically, he observed temporal lobe spikes in Joseph's brainwaves, because they did brainwave scans. And it was similar to those found in the small percentage of patients he had suffering from alcohol idiosyncratic intoxication. He diagnosed Joseph with this disorder, which results in major behavioral changes from even a small amount of alcohol. And he gave examples, like one that I hadn't heard, but he gave an example that Joseph peed into a punch bowl and masturbated at the library on one occasion, or 2 occasions, or another occasion while he was drinking.
Problematic.
He said as a result, Joseph may not have known what he was doing when he killed Jeanne. He also said that, he did a clinical interview, and he found that the defendant, or Joseph, recalled beating Jeanne, but not raping or strangling her. So he testified that Joseph exhibited, quote, a pattern of amnesia for periods of intoxication. He also testified that Joseph had been in 2 car accidents previously and had suffered some head trauma. He referenced the suicide notes that were written by Joseph after flunking out. So he was making a case that, there is a case probably for mental illness or some type of insanity here. But, it's always a battle of the experts. The prosecution had their own experts and their own conclusions. And they said Joseph was perfectly capable of making decisions and predicting the reactions of other. They said he had totally the ability for accurate perceptions of what was right and wrong. And they said basically it was his antisocial attitude that created these problems of his own making. And they did not feel that he was suffering from any kind of mental defect. Joseph's father testified for the defense about leaving Joseph's mother when Joseph was only 4 years old and only seeing his child 8 to 10 times a year thereafter. He was also allowed to address his 2 hospitalizations for mental issues or mental illness, once for manic depression and once for manic depression plus suicidal tendencies, because they're trying to build a family history here. Joseph's cellmate Marvin Brunson testified that he confessed the whole thing. He beat and raped this girl. He had used the broken glass. I'm not going to go too much into this because whether or not he testified or whether or not that was accurate, I don't think that was the strongest piece of evidence. Did Joseph testify? What do you think?
I would say no if they had a decent defense strategy.
Yeah, he sat in court reading the Bible. Yep. Motions by the defense for a dismissal of charges, which happens very often at the end of a case, and a mistrial were denied by the judge.
They usually are.
The judge also issued, though, Amy, a crucial order, something that would really hurt the defense. The jury would not be permitted to consider the insanity defense because the defense had not proven the legal elements.
I would agree with that. I think that was the right move.
Yeah, so also you can't be insulated from criminal liability for your own actions taken in a voluntary, mental state. We've heard that before, that alcohol is not an excuse. If if he had this kind of mental illness that affected him without the alcohol that he couldn't control, then it could be used, but it was voluntarily induced.
Or if somebody held him down and made him take a substance that impaired him. That's not what we're seeing here.
That's not what we're seeing here. So the jury was charged with determining the degree of murder, if any, Joseph would be found guilty of. A finding of first-degree murder would require that, obviously, there would have to be some intent and premeditation.
If you love smash burgers, the crispy edges, bold, beefy flavor, you need to try Omaha Steaks' all-new smash burgers. They're pre-smashed, made with 100% extra-aged beef, and grill-ready. No mess, no griddle. I tossed a few on the grill last weekend, straight from freezer to bun in just 5 minutes. The sear? Perfect. The flavor? Rich, juicy, and seriously next level. Way better than anything I've had from the store. Plus, I grabbed the Built for the Grill pack at omahasteaks.com/smash and scored 16 smash burgers free. With high-quality meats always on hand, I'm already eyeing my next order. Maybe there's steak burgers or that killer bacon-wrapped filet. Family-owned since 1917, Omaha Steaks brings 5 generations of premium quality delivered right to your door. Smash burger lovers, this is your moment. Get ready to smash expectations with new Omaha Steaks smash burgers. Visit omahasteaks.com/smash and order the Built for the Grill pack with 16 free smash burgers. That's 16 free Omaha Steaks smash burgers at omahasteaks.com/smash. See site for details.
Missions to Mars, driverless cars, AI chatbots. Feels like we're already living in the future. Well, Robinhood is built for the future of trading. Robinhood's intuitive design makes trading seamless. Spot opportunities and take control of your trades with tools like screeners, simulated returns, and Strategy Builder. On Robinhood, traders have access to hundreds of popular stocks and ETFs, 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, so you can keep up with today's fast-paced markets. You can now even trade stocks and crypto all in one place with the new desktop platform, Robinhood Legend. The future of trading is fast, powerful, and precise. Experience it now on Robinhood. Investing is risky. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Trading during extended hours involves additional risks. Cryptocurrency services are offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC, NMLS ID 1702840. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services.
In closing arguments, the prosecutor did something very smart and very impactful. He used a timer to illustrate to the jury the length of time it takes to strangle someone.
This is a tactic that has been used many times before, and I think it's extremely powerful.
Absolutely. He said 4 minutes, inches from her face, 4 minutes as she gasped for air, 4 minutes where I'm sure she begged for her life, 4 minutes where her eyes glazed over, 4 minutes with his hands closed around her throat. Did he have intent? I submit he did.
I mean, that's as powerful as it gets. And sometimes when they use that tactic, they'll put a picture of the victim up too. Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely. I thought that was extremely powerful. Yeah. Defense counsel, they were going for the fact that he was intoxicated and he couldn't premeditate. They tried to just paint him as a tragic figure who had a very bad child life and marked by mental instability. Well, the jury deliberated for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Not very long.
No, not very long. What do you think they came back with?
Guilty of first-degree murder.
Absolutely. He was guilty of all counts. Jeanne's parents tearfully embraced, and Joseph showed some emotion for the first time throughout the trial, putting his hand to his face. But now the jury, because this is a death penalty case, what happens next?
Well, now there has to be the penalty phase.
Correct. And they're deciding. They have to decide between life and death. Obviously, the prosecutors are pushing for death while the defense is pushing for life. Both sides present mitigating and aggravating factors, very similar to what we just went through of the trial. The prosecution would show the brutality of the crime, and the defense would try to paint Joseph as a tragic figure.
Except now it's not guilt or innocence. It's does this person deserve to die or not?
That's exactly right. They had his family on begging for mercy. He testified himself.
He did testify here.
Yes, he testified
Usually the defendant will testify at penalty phase.
That's absolutely right. It's their last chance to prevail. And
I'm assuming there were victim impact statements as well.
Correct. Joseph said, "I would just like to say I really can't express the sorrow, the shame, and the dishonor I'll bear for the rest of my life. I wish I could give you an answer to what happened, but I've searched my heart and soul for why this tragedy occurred, and I can't tell you. I just ask you to spare my life so I can help someone in the world."
Again, he's not taking responsibility, but I guess he's being honest.
Well, they asked him, "Did you kill Jeanne Clery?" in that same testimony, and he said yes.
But it sounds like he feels bad for what it's doing to him, not for what it's doing to the victim's family.
I think that's very true. After the 3-day hearing, the jury unanimously found that all aggravating factors existed, and they sentenced Joseph to death after just 2.5 hours.
How old was he again at this time of the crime?
He was 20.
Okay.
19 or 20.
Okay.
He was a sophomore. Okay. Immediately after the sentence was handed down, the Clerys met with the media, announced their campaign to fight to save lives in the country and fight the colleges to force them into more security for students. So they announced that they intended to sue Lehigh, who they saw as partially responsible for their daughter's death because of a lack of security on campus and the lack of open communications about crimes on campus. Lehigh records show that there were more than 2,000 propped open doors reported by Lehigh security during the 1985 to 86 academic year, including 188 at Stoughton, and nothing was done to fix the problem. They're saying that there should have been sterner warnings and enforcement of this. Howard Clery told the Philadelphia Inquirer that college campuses had hidden dangers. Quote, "They never tell you about the robberies and rapes and assaults that are going on, so the kids are not careful." The Clerys filed their negligence lawsuit in Montgomery County Court seeking $25 million in damages from the university. Again, their claims were that, basically the school did not do enough to protect students. And back to the actual crime statistics on the campus, the state police, the 1986 Uniform Crime Report reflected that in that year, 1986, there were 249 serious crimes reported on Lehigh's campus, but not necessarily reported to students. According to another source, an FBI report divulged that there were 38 violent crimes at Lehigh between 1984 and 1987 that included murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. So crimes were happening, but the schools weren't reporting them. And I think that's really the gist here. And I could go on with lots of statistics because these statistics were reflected not just at Lehigh, but many other college campuses. And so the Clerys were upset that the schools were not reporting these crimes. And the Clerys' crusade went all the way to the Pennsylvania legislature. By October 1987, State Representative Richard McClatchy, who was their friend and neighbor, introduced a bill that required schools to publicize annual crime statistics going back at least 3 years and to disclose their security forces, training, procedures, and policies to students, parents, and employees. It also required prospective students to disclose if they had any felony convictions. Colleges and universities that failed to comply would be fined up to $10,000 for each violation. The College and University Information Act became Pennsylvania law in the spring of 1988 after passing both chambers of the state legislature by unanimous vote and being signed into law by Governor Robert Casey. This was the only law of its type in the nation. But within a few months, Amy, several additional states began considering similar legislation thanks to the act of the Clerys.
We see that a lot. When there's policy change, it starts on the state level and then it kind of trickles out as other states see the positive effects.
Absolutely. So in each of those states, these bills that were being considered were titled the Clery bills. Meanwhile, in July of 1988, it was announced that Lehigh and the Clerys had reached a settlement of their lawsuit. The monetary amount was not disclosed, but one source reported that the school agreed to pay the family in excess of $2 million. In addition, the school agreed to spend $1 million to implement a pilot security program on a trial basis. This included improved lighting, key card access systems, which we had. I think, did you have that when you were in school, a key card access system?
Yeah.
Because I remember some of the door prop, but we had the key card for sure. Furthermore, the Clerys announced that they intended to use the settlement money to establish a nonprofit called Security on Campus Incorporated, whose goal was to get a federal law enacted to publish a summary report of all the school's crime stats and evaluation of all their security procedures, and assess the liability of these schools stemming from lawsuits arising out of major campus crimes like their daughters. Their nonprofit is now known as the Clery Center.
Think of how many lives they've probably saved.
Absolutely. The Clerys weren't satisfied, though, with passing the law requiring institutions of higher learning to disclose their crime stats on an annual basis just in their home state, Amy. And there were approximately 10 other states they had persuaded, but they wanted to take this national. And so they did. They engineered the introduction of their campus crime reporting bill in the United States House of Representatives. They testified before Congress about the need for these reporting requirements, and the bill received huge support. It also happened to, I think one of the reasons it received such strong support is because it coincided with the Ted Bundy sorority murders. Do you remember this?
Of course.
Okay, so there was a lot of support, and President George H.W. Bush signed the Crime Awareness and Security Act of 1990, which took effect on August 1st, 1991. And this would really mandate all colleges and universities who received any federal funding to report these statistics, report about the security, all the things the Clery had wanted. And, you know, it leveraged real huge sanctions if compliance was not reached. And several years later, in 1998, the act was renamed the Jeanne Clery Disclosure Act of Campus Security, Policy, and Crime Statistics Act. It's a federal statute, but it's locally known as the Clery Act, which is how I've always understood it on our campus.
Yep, me too.
Okay. All right, so the Clerys succeeded. They got the states to pass their legislation, and they got this passed federally, all the universities. I mean, what a huge stride.
Yeah, the amount that they've done is so admirable.
Absolutely. But what about Joseph? Was his legal battle over?
I would assume not.
Not, because I'm bringing it up, right? In July of 1988, Joseph's death penalty sentence was upheld. He was sentenced to die in the electric chair. But of course, as all the defendants have the right to, he appealed. Joseph's initial appeals were denied. The Supreme Court upheld his conviction in 1990. A PCRA Act hearing in January 1996 found no cause for relief, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court affirmed the denial of relief. So he's not doing well. Next, Joseph filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus containing 14 claims that his death sentence was found in violation of 6th, 8th, and the 14th Amendments because jury instructions were incorrect. Now, in May 2002, the court held that all of his claims were meritless except one claim, Amy. And what they found was that the jury instructions contained defects held to be unfair to defendants by previous case law.
What instructions?
The jury instructions that the original trial judge gave.
But do you know, like, specifically what part of the instructions they had an issue with?
I know that the issue they took is that the instructions were given in a way that prevented the consideration of constitutionally relevant evidence. So I think essentially the judge said, you don't have to consider this evidence when you're considering whether or not to do the death penalty. So what happened from this? Well, Joseph's death sentence was vacated because of this issue. And they said, again, that unfortunately, a trial judge did not give clear jury instructions, raising the possibility that jurors did not follow relevant death penalty provisions. In the end, in August 2002, Joseph agreed to accept a sentence of life without the possibility of parole in exchange for dropping all appeals. The Clery family was in court to hear the new sentence. Joseph addressed the court saying, quote, "If the bereaved family wants to shout at me, kick me, whatever, I'm willing to do anything to help them to feel better at all." The Clerys issued a news release after the sentencing. Jeanne died a horrible death at the hands of a sadistic, vicious, bigoted killer. Shame on Judge Brody. But in fairness, the Clerys had agreed to the new deal. They were part of this, so they knew that this was coming down. And they were tired of the court battles, reopening all the old wounds. It just became too much. The Clery family's willingness to agree to end the case weighed into the judge's decision in the end. Although their lives were shattered in April of 1986 by the death of their daughter, these people have persevered with courage and determination. Their work across the country through their organization Security on Campus has made college campuses across America more safe for students. And that would really be their legacy. But in the years after Jeanne's death, well, several years later, about 30 years later, Lehigh would find itself kind of in hot water again, and they learned that they were being investigated for this type of misconduct in violation of the Clery Act. The Brown and White reported in September 2021 that the U.S. Department of Education Clery Act investigation of Lehigh's compliance was ongoing. This was after a couple of potential violations, but serious ones, were reported. Howard Clery has since passed away. The Clery Center is still going strong. The Clerys turned their personal tragedy into a successful campaign for change, and students all over the country, as we said, have benefited from the protections of the Clery Act. But it's worth noting that overall, colleges report that the vast majority of crimes against their students are committed by other students. And with kids living in close quarters with access to alcohol and drugs, all the legislation in the world will not be able to prevent all violent crimes on college campuses. But at least now, Amy, I think the takeaway here is that the schools are required to try. And I think we can honestly say, as we have throughout, we commend the Clerys for helping to make universities and college campuses, like our own, safer for students and faculty alike. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Campus Killings. We hope you'll join us next time.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg, with research and writing by Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings, or on Facebook by searching for Campus Killings Podcast. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.
Raise your hand if you want your nails to look perfect all the time. Me too. I'm Sarah Gibson Tuttle from Olive & June, and this is exactly why we created the Manny system. We wanted to make it possible for everyone everywhere to give themselves a beautiful manicure at home. With our tools and our long-lasting polish, each manicure with our Manny system comes out to just $2. That's right, $2. No more $30, $40, $50 manis that you get at a salon and they take hours. Now you can paint your nails on your time and love them more than ever. And by the way, when people ask, who did your nails, where did you get them done? You're going to proudly say, I did them myself. Get 20% off your first Manny system with code DIYNail20 at oliveandjune.com/DIYNail20. That's code DIYNail20 for 20% off at oliveandjune.com/DIYNail20.